Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and a subscriber asked a question that I think is a fantastic question, and it's one that I don't think people understand. And it's mainly because there's so much bullshit out here in the fitness world, bodybuilding world, everything else, that people don't actually grasp the reality of how much stuff people actually use. They don't understand that sometimes the self-admitted doses of certain pro bodybuilders like Lee Priest and others are actually lower than most self-proclaimed naturals actually use, meaning these guys lie about what they actually use. There's plenty of guys who claim natty, who have big audiences, who think that they're natty, who use 5 times the doses that guys like Lee Priest and others claim that they use and everything sometimes. So you'd be really, really surprised what guys use out there. But he wants to know if drugs and anabolics are proven in scientific studies, in laboratory conditions, to build muscle faster than lifting weights, even without lifting weights. Then why are so many pro athletes, if most pro athletes are on a little bit of something, why aren't they bigger? Why aren't they all jacked? Fantastic question. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, getting my places in, and let's answer that, because it's a great question and it actually has a very, very simple answer. The Cliff Notes, because they don't use that much. And the studies show that the amounts that most serious athletes use, who aren't trying to get really big, of what they use won't put much muscle on you either, just a little bit. Just a little bit. And in fact, many of these guys are pretty big for naturals. A lot of them are very big. It's just that people's ideas have been skewed about how big a natural actually can get. Again, the internet hasn't helped that. So what's really going on here? Well, we need to step back and assess what people are using and what the studies say. If you guys remember, the studies that I have linked, and again, this stuff's easy to find. Anyone can find these studies through endocrinology journals. The stuff's everywhere. What we know is that it's dose dependent. The amount of muscle people gain on drugs is dependent upon the amount they use. In fact, the amount that a person uses is actually more important than whether they even lift weights or not, as far as how much muscle they gain. Meaning, if someone uses double the amount they might have used, meaning someone can probably use a certain amount, a small amount of an anabolic like testosterone, lift weights, and then double their dose and stop lifting, and they'll probably gain a little bit more muscle, even though they quit lifting completely just from doubling the dose. That should tell you how powerful these substances are. But the studies that we have show that. They show the direct correspondence between the amount of muscle they gain. Meaning, the guys who gained more muscle than the people who were still lifting weights were all on pretty hefty amounts. Like, well, not by modern bodybuilding standards, but by athlete standards, they would have been hefty amounts. Meaning they were running like 600 milligrams of testosterone every week, under, again, pharmaceutical grade, under laboratory conditions, given by trained medical researchers. This stuff coming from a lab, not something someone bought on the street. But yeah, we found in studies 500 to 600 milligrams of testosterone will put more muscle on someone who sits on their ass and doesn't exercise than actually lifting weights will. But when they start going down under that, no, it's not really more than lifting weights. In fact, in some cases, it can be less if they don't lift any weights. So that's what people need to understand there. And we found that any amount, even at high therapeutic amounts, puts a little bit of muscle on people, a pound or two, but not 10 pounds of muscle, not 15 pounds. But like the studies that we've seen, the average seems to be about 18. But every time the dose was lowered, the groups all had a range, and no one really passed the other's ranges in the studies, meaning the guys who were on 300 milligrams, none of them gained as much muscle as the guys on 600, even though none of them lifted. When you look at any of these studies that have been done on this. And when you think about what most endurance athletes, or guys in lighter weight classes in sports, MMA guys even, boxers, different people, what they've admitted to using, when you really get them to talk about it, or endurance guys, or guys like Lance Armstrong, what they admit they took, it's really, really common for these guys to use around 200 milligrams of testosterone a week with a little growth hormone. Okay, that's not a lot. To a lot of people, that might sound like a lot, because if they look at the blood work on that, they're like, wow, that's actually way more testosterone than any testosterone booster would claim to have. But they don't gain much muscle from it. Now you guys start to understand why testosterone boosters are stupid. A testosterone booster that claims to boost your testosterone 40% for a few hours every day after you take it doesn't produce weekly average serum levels even remotely close to what Lance Armstrong's dose was. Lance Armstrong looked very jacked? No. Did Lance Armstrong lift weights? Yes. See the problem? There's your problem with your test boosters right there. They don't even produce the amount of testosterone that Lance Armstrong was putting in his body, even if they work as intended and work as their claims to do. So even if they did spike it, it's nowhere near what Lance Armstrong got using $3 a week worth of this stuff. And yet he wasn't jacked. Why? He just didn't use enough. He only gained a little bit. He probably only gained 3 or 4 pounds of muscle ever from his drug use. Just not that big of a deal, and it's mainly because these guys aren't using these things to gain muscle. They're using these things to improve their endurance, to improve their recovery, to improve their work capacity. Well, 200 milligrams of testosterone has an enormous impact on endurance and work capacity. So when you look at it from that perspective, the reason they're using these things, they're using the correct amounts because they're not trying to bulk up. They're not trying to get big. They want a recovery edge. They want to be able to train longer, train harder, and recover from it more quickly so they can do it again sooner. All they need is the 200 milligrams. All they need is a 1 unit of growth hormone with that. So you have to understand it from that perspective. So of course they don't get big. But that doesn't mean that the guys who sit around in the labs who are using 600 milligrams every week for 5 months straight in these studies, they all gain 18 pounds of muscle without lifting weights, even though they had been lifting weights before. They're averaging 18 pounds of solid ass muscle gains, not water, because it's confirmed with DEXA scans. And so when you look at it from that perspective, and then you step back and go, okay, well, wait, they gain 18, so how much are some of these other guys using? Well, look at Jerry Ward. I showed you guys Jerry Ward's stack, publicly, well, not publicly admitted, but privately admitted to me. I took all the screenshots. How much is that? Stop and think about that. He admitted to using 2 grams. That's 2,000 milligrams of combined testosterone and anabolics. These studies are on 600. Studies are on 600. 2,000 over 3 times, plus growth hormone, plus IGF-1, all together in an anabolic cocktail. You know, guys, honestly, that's not that uncommon. That really isn't uncommon at all. There are plenty of guys on YouTube using 1 gram, 2 grams. Of course, Rich Piana admitting to 4.5, Boston Lloyd admitting to 13 grams. So you're talking 4,500 for Rich Piana, 13,000 milligrams for Boston Lloyd. So when you step back and look at what guys are admitting to using, maybe that should make a little more sense why these guys are big and why they're jacked in comparison to other guys you know who use a little bit. And you have to understand the difference there. The doses determine how much muscle people gain from these things. They have a dose-dependent relationship. All the studies have shown that. So if you're not understanding why one guy who uses anabolic drugs isn't nearly as big as another, well, yeah, there's a genetic component. There could be a food component, but there's also a dose component. And I mean, you just simply cannot expect someone who uses 200 milligrams to gain as much muscle as someone who uses 2,000. I mean, it just doesn't make sense any more than any other substance you put in your body. You know, if you drink 2 shots of tequila, are you going to get as drunk as your friend or have the same effect as your friend who drinks 20 shots of tequila? And that's just another drug, using a different drug as an example that has a measurable effect on the body. No, he's going to get a lot more intoxicated than you. Now, he might have a different tolerance than you do. He might have a different effect from alcohol on him than you do, but nobody has enough tolerance that they aren't going to get more intoxicated off 20 shots than someone else off 2 shots. All right, and that's how big of extremes we're dealing with. Think about that. 200 milligrams is what a lot of athletes use versus guys like Jerry Ward using 2,000. You know. And guys like me who incidentally might be around that 500 to 700 milligram range. But, you know, not like I would ever actually admit to anything specifically. But, you know, I've heard rumors that I'm in that range. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not. So you've got to factor these things in, guys, as far as that goes. There's a dose-dependent response. And, of course, guys who use more of any substance are going to have more of an effect. And now, is it going to be a direct linear? No, meaning someone who uses 2,000 milligrams of some substance, doesn't even have to be an anabolic drug, it could be any drug, isn't going to automatically have double the positive effect of 1,000, right? They're not going to have it. There could be a diminished returns, but there is going to be more of an effect. And of course, there's the factor that the more of anything that someone uses, the more side effects they're going to have. And if there's health risk involved, the more health risks they're going to have. And that's also factored in as well. And that's something a lot of people have to consider with these athletes. Some of the negative effects of these substances not only can negatively affect their health, and a lot of these guys are millionaires, they're not really wanting to die young, but there's the fact that some of the negative effects can impede their performance. They can impede their goals. You know, there's substances that might increase work capacity and endurance at a certain dose, but if you go too high on it, it could cause cramping. It could cause muscle pumps that reduce your work capacity. Might even reduce your cardiovascular capacity, your ability to run or ride a bike for hours. Well, if that happens, it becomes a problem. It becomes a performance-reducing drug. When it was a performance-enhancing drug at half that dose. So something else you have to consider there. It's not just about they don't always want to gain size. A lot of these guys don't want to gain the negative side effects, because those substances, when the negative side effects kick in at certain doses, could actually hurt what they're trying to do. So also another thing going on there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the biggest factor when you look at two different guys who use these substances as to why one might be bigger than another, even if they both have used a similar number of years, probably very, very different doses. Makes a massive difference. Then you factor in individual genetics, diet, training, all of that behind it. So there's a lot of different factors there, but doses are up at the top of the list. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.